Everyone seeks faith, but only a few seek love. Because faith gives comfort, but love demands that you burn. Slight pause, eye contact, and Ibn Arabi says, it is only through love that the human becomes real. Ibn Arabi never treated love as an emotion. Love for him was the secret architecture of existence, the inner fire through which the soul becomes transparent. Faith is easy because faith gives you certainty. Certainty gives you identity. Identity gives you psychological security. That's why people chase belief. But love is not safe. Love is the fire that melts the boundaries you worship. Love forces you to surrender your illusion of being separate. Love destroys the you that you hide behind, and when that false you collapses, what remains? Ibn Arabi calls the trace of the real. People seek faith because faith confirms them, but love transforms them. Faith gives you answers. Love gives you annihilation. Faith helps you speak about God. Love makes you silent within God. Love is not when you prove God. Love is when you become the evidence. This is why only a few seek love, because belief is a comfort zone. But love is a rebirth. Not improvement, rebirth. And those who walk the path of love, in the language of Ibn Arabi, are not just believers, they are the ones chosen by the fire. Faith is easier because it confirms your identity, but love is rare because it destroys the identity you cling to, and this one sentence contains the entire pain and entire beauty of the path of Ibn Arabi, because faith has a psychology, but love has an ontology. Faith has comfort, but love has combustion. Faith lets you keep yourself, but love demands that you lose yourself. Faith allows you to remain what you already are, but love forces you to become what you were originally meant to be. And this is the reason why almost everybody gravitates towards belief systems, because belief is convenient, belief is familiar, belief is safe, belief gives you answers quickly, and those answers act like a shield against the terror of the unknown. And the unknown is exactly where love hides, but most people never even approach that door, because to touch the unknown, you must be willing to let the known dissolve, and that is a terrifying internal surgery that most humans do not have the courage to perform. They want a God they understand, they want a path they can intellectually explain, they want a truth they can quote, they want spirituality that still keeps their identity intact, so their religion becomes a mirror that reflects their own ego back to them, and they call that mirror faith. So yes, faith feels peaceful, faith feels stable, faith feels like a home, but love does not let you sit still. Love drags you out of your home. Love forces your identity to leave the familiar ground. Love begins by questioning every belief you proudly collected. Love is not interested in what you say you believe. Love wants to know what you are willing to surrender. Love wants to know what you are willing to burn. Love wants to know how much of yourself you are prepared to sacrifice in order to become truth instead of merely speaking about it. And here lies the secret. Ibn Arabi keeps pointing at the lover is not the one who loves God. The lover, the one who dies in God. The lover does not try to fit God into their belief structure. The lover allows God to rip their belief structure apart, because love is not about correct belief, love is about correct disappearance, and your ego will fight this with all its strength, because the ego loves faith, but fears love, because faith allows the ego to survive inside a spiritual vocabulary. Faith allows the ego to hide behind divine concepts. Faith allows the ego to feel spiritual while still staying in charge, but love dethrones the ego. Love is mutiny, love is revolution, love is the destruction of your favorite identity, and when the ego feels this danger, it will try to cling even harder to belief, because belief feels like control, while love feels like surrender. Belief feels like standing, while love feels like falling. Belief feels like safety, while love feels like death, and most humans will choose safety over death, even if death is the only doorway to real life. This is the paradox of the path. Belief comforts the mind, but love consumes the soul. Belief stabilizes you, but love evaporates you. Belief organizes your concepts, but love disorganizes your illusions. Belief makes you feel close to God, but love makes there be no distance left, because there is no you left to measure distance. The reason so few choose love is because love is not an achievement, love is an extinction. Faith gives you certainty, love gives you immolation. Faith helps you construct a spiritual identity, love burns that identity to ash, so you can finally see that the divine is not something outside of you. The divine is the very flame that is trying to consume you from within, and only those who dare to be lit on fire ever truly meet God in the language of existence rather than the language of belief. For Ibn Arabi, love is not a feeling and not an emotional reaction and not an inner mood that comes and goes with circumstances. Love for him is not psychology at all. Love is ontology, meaning love is the way reality itself is built. Love is the grammar of being, the architecture of existence, the fundamental law beneath all forms and all movement. So, when people say love, they usually mean the emotional warmth they feel in their chest, or the butterflies they feel for a person, or the pleasant comfort of being understood and valued. But Ibn Arabi sees all those as reflections, shadows, faint traces of a deeper metaphysical fire, and in front of that fire, these emotional versions are nothing more than smoke, because emotions can change. Emotions are whether emotions are small waves on the surface of a vast ocean, but the love Ibn Arabi is speaking about is the ocean itself, and the ocean is not emotional. The ocean is structural, it is the carrier of all form. It is the ground of all manifestation. He says that God did not just create through love, He created because of love. He created out of love. Creation is not an event, creation is a consequence of love, because love is the primordial force that makes the nothingness desire manifestation, that brings existence out of non-existence, that calls the possible into actuality. Love is the magnetic law of existence, because everything that exists emerges from a yearning to be seen. This is the deepest secret. When Ibn Arabi says love, he does not mean romance, he means the metaphysical attraction between the hidden and the revealed, between the unknowable and the manifest, between the source and the expression. So, when he says love, he means the force that makes the invisible want to become visible, and the visible want to return to the invisible, and every soul you see is a small version of that cosmic dance. Souls are reflections of this ancient yearning, souls are sparks of that fire. Every desire in the human is actually a disguised memory from the origin, every longing a trace of the first love, the primary love, the eternal love that wanted to see itself, so it created mirrors. Therefore the human is not a seeker of love. The human is literally made out of love, because the human is nothing but divine potential reflecting itself back to itself. And here is why this matters to spirituality. When most people say, "I love God," they mean they feel emotionally touched or elevated or comforted. But Ibn Arabi would say, you do not love God because you are emotional, you love God because that is the metaphysical truth of your existence. Your love for God is not something you produce, it is something you uncover. Love is not your action, love is reality revealing itself in you, and this is why love does not require proof. You do not reason your way into love, you remember your way into love, because the one who loves is not your psychological identity, the one who loves is your deeper essence, and that essence is not in time, it is not in ego, it is not in separation. And this explains why true love annihilates the self. Love is not a feeling the self experiences. Love is the flame that dissolves the one who experiences. The self is not the container of love. The self is the obstacle to love. And when the self burns, love remains, because love is the original substance, the original matter, the original law underneath everything. This is why Ibn Arabi says, the lover is not someone who has love, the lover is someone who is made of love. So, when you choose the path of love, you are not choosing emotion, you are choosing metaphysical truth. When you surrender to love, you are not becoming weak, you are returning to your origin. When you enter love, you are not distancing yourself from reality, you are stepping into the heart of reality, because for Ibn Arabi, love is not an emotion, love is what existence is made of. Belief talks about God, but love becomes evidence, because belief works inside language, but love works inside being. Belief remains in speech, but love becomes substance, and this is the entire difference that separates theologians from lovers. Theologians think knowing about God is nearness to God, but Ibn Arabi says describing is not arriving, and explaining is not entering, and talking is not merging, because belief always keeps a distance. Belief looks at God, belief thinks about God, belief analyzes God, belief measures God, belief defends a concept of God, but love collapses the distance. Love does not analyze, love annihilates, because love does not move inside the mind, love moves inside the soul, and the soul is not satisfied with definitions. The soul wants union, and within the realm of love, union is not poetic, union is literal, not in a biological sense, not in a physical sense, but in a metaphysical, ontological, experiential sense, where the boundary between lover and beloved dissolves, and a new mode of knowing appears, not concept knowing, but presence knowing, and presence knowing, when you do not know God through information, but through transformation. Belief says God is there, I am here, and this is the separation that belief never crosses, but love says there is no there or here except as illusions that exist inside the unripe self, because the self invents distance in order to protect its identity, and belief helps the self maintain itself. Belief is a fortress. Belief is a shield. Belief is ego surviving with spiritual vocabulary, and this is why most people choose belief over love, because belief gives power to ego, while love kills it. Belief lets the ego be proud of having the right doctrine, while love demands the ego sacrifice itself on the altar of truth. Belief wants to speak, belief wants to argue, belief wants to prove, belief wants to convince. But love is exhausted with speaking. Love is not in the game of debate. Love is not interested in winning an argument. Love does not want to prove anything, because love is proof itself. Love is the evidence. Love is the reality shining through the human that has emptied itself for the real. The lover becomes transparent, and when the lover becomes transparent, the divine light passes through without distortion, and the presence of that radiance becomes the evidence of God, not through speech, but through being. And in this state there is no need to talk about God, because God is spoken through the lover's existence without words. And this is what Ibn Arabi means when he says the lover becomes a mirror, and in that mirror God sees God, the real sees the real, the source sees the source. There is no second entity left to explain anything. The lover is not a believer, the lover is an opened window, and the wind of the real blows through, and that wind becomes the proof. This is why saints don't argue, this is why the realized ones don't debate, this is why the true mystics stay silent. Not because they don't have words, but because their existence is louder than language, their presence is more convincing than any theology, because belief remains second-hand, and love becomes first-hand. Belief is interpretive, love is experiential. Belief quotes truth, love becomes truth. Belief requires external authority, scholars, books, scriptures, texts, but love requires inward death, because the door to experiential knowing is on the other side of ego, and ego is not destroyed by reading. Ego is destroyed by burning, and this burning is love. That is why those who really touch love rarely speak much about God, because they have crossed the need to talk about God. Just like a fish has no need to describe water, and a flame has no need to describe light, it simply burns, and that burning its evidence, and that evidence is more credible than argument. So belief talks about God, but love becomes evidence, because when you become empty of yourself, you become full of the real, and that living fullness becomes the unspoken proof of the divine in the world. Faith gives you certainty, but love gives you rebirth, and this one contrast is enough to understand why the path of lovers has always been a path of the few, because certainty is emotionally comfortable, certainty feels like stability, certainty feels like home, certainty gives the self a place to stand, but love removes the ground beneath the feet. Love pulls the foundation away and throws the self into the abyss of transformation. And transformation is never gentle, transformation is violent to the ego, because the ego survives through continuity, and it dies through change. Faith comforts the ego, because faith offers conclusions, faith gives frameworks, faith gives answers. Faith gives formulas, faith gives a feeling of resolution, but love does not want to resolve you, love wants to rewrite you, love wants to burn you down, so a newer you, a truer you, a you beyond the illusion of selfhood can emerge, and this is why most people settle for faith, because faith lets them stay who they already are, faith lets them keep their old identity, faith lets them hold onto their psychological narrative, faith allows them to add spirituality on top of ego structure. But love is Not an addition love is demolition love is a fire that enters your center and begins to erase the false self you are unconsciously addicted to, and this fire is not symbolic. Ibn Arabi means it literally, that the self must burn in the exposure to the real, because as long as the self remains unburnt, the self remains a barrier between the soul and God. So, when he says love gives rebirth, he does not mean emotional refreshment, he means metaphysical reconstruction, he means ontological renewal. And this process is frightening for most human beings, because in order to truly love you must let go of the one who thinks he is the lover, because as long as you think you are the one who loves you are still ego, and as long as ego stands in the center, love cannot become the axis, so people cling to faith, because faith looks safer, and it is safer. Faith allows you to speak about God confidently, but love forces you to see that you are not separate from God. Faith gives you a framework to believe in God, but love gives you an experience that dissolves the believer inside the beloved. Faith gives you a stable world image, but love breaks the world image and shows you a deeper reality beneath it. Faith wants order, but love wants truth. And truth is not orderly. Truth is volcanic. Truth is disruptive. Truth is wild and raw and primordial and not polite. And when truth erupts inside the soul, the old identity cannot survive. It collapses, it shatters, it dissolves, and this dissolution feels like death, and that is why only the brave choose love, because they are willing to die not biologically, but psychologically, not externally, but internally, and that internal death is the point of rebirth, because the self that emerges after this burning is not the old identity patched back together, it is a new presence born from the ashes of the old. This is what Ibn Arabi means by fana, then back annihilation, then subsistence. First you die, then you begin again, but you begin as a vessel of the real, not as a personality seeking validation or certainty. And this is why faith and love should not be confused. Faith is not evil, faith is not wrong, faith is simply limited. Faith prepares you, but only love completes you, because faith introduces you to the idea of God, but love introduces you to the reality of God, and the reality can only be known when the false self is destroyed, because the real can only enter an empty house. This is why most of humanity stays with faith and never steps into love, because faith reassures them, but love transforms them, and transformation feels like death. So only the courageous choose rebirth through love, because only the courageous are willing to let their old self die so the eternal can be born through them.